So we just finished watching the town hall, the Commander-in-Chief town hall, hosted by MSNBC, Hillary Clinton, and then Donald Trump. Overall, what are your thoughts?
Overall, I feel extremely depressed. I don't know what to say. That was appalling in so many different ways. And Trump doesn't need to outline any of his policy ideas because people hate Hillary Clinton so much that every time he's asked a question, he doesn't have to answer it. All he does is insult Hillary Clinton, and people are satisfied with that. I mean, that's what the country has come to in our presidential election, and it's depressing. And so the first part of this town hall began with Hillary Clinton. Was not impressed with a lot of her answers. And then Trump comes in, and it makes you think, oh my God, you know, regardless of how unimpressed I am with Hillary, this guy is a maniac. So let me talk about Hillary for a second. My biggest issue with her was the way she defended herself when it came to the email scandal. You know, her argument was, okay, well, there were classified emails, but they didn't have the header indicating that they were classified. So as a result, I didn't think it was that big of a deal at the time. But I'm paraphrasing her, by the way. That's not her direct quote.
It wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, look, if you are in the federal government, if you have a high position like Secretary of the State, and you go around talking about how experienced you are, well, you should know whether or not the content of that email should be classified or if it's sensitive. So this argument that it didn't have that header did not appease me, and I'm guessing it's not going to appease a lot of people, right? When she talks about foreign policy, you know, she talks about it with a lot of authority because she does have a lot of experience. Yeah, she made a lot of bad decisions. Yes, she's hawkish. And, you know, even when she was asked about, you know, whether or not she's going to scale back her hawkishness, she kind of answered back with more evidence that she is very hawkish with foreign policy, and she plans on continuing that. Then she said something about how we'll never invade Iraq again. And don't say that, because you don't know. Right? Like, strong statements like that.
It's a strong promise that she won't be sending ground troops back in.
Right.
Like, she wasn't vague or dancing around it. Like,
Yeah.
if she does, you can go back and say she said no ground troops in Iraq.
I like that. I think, you know, obviously, yes, it could turn out to be untrue, and then she'll have to deal with that. But as
Yeah.
far
At
as-
least it's on video.
yeah.
So that happened, and, you know, it's depressing because that's our Democratic candidate, and we wanted someone a lot more progressive than that, right?
Yeah.
And then Donald Trump comes in, and he's a nightmare. He doesn't answer any of the questions with actual policy ideas. He never answers anything with policy ideas. In fact, during one question, his answer was, I have that policy in my on my website. No. This is a town hall where we're trying to figure out what your policy ideas are. Instead of immediately insulting Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, why don't you tell us what you would do differently? He never tells us what he would do differently.
Yeah.
Never. Just talks about how much America sucks, how much we're not winning, how much Hillary Clinton sucks, and that's it. And American people, American voters, are sheep, and that's good enough for them. Okay, insult Hillary, and that makes you qualified to be the next president of the United States. That does not make anyone qualified to be the next president of the United States. We need to know what he would do differently, and he doesn't even know.
Yeah.
I'm very frustrated by it for some of the reasons that you were and some different ones. I thought that, you know, I don't think Matt Lauer deliberately tried to go easy on Donald Trump. That seems unlikely. But Donald Trump was sort of allowed to have that conversation go in a way that he wanted to. And obviously, as was the case with George Bush, and Andy Hiller, I think, was the great reporter in Boston who asked George W. Bush those questions for which he was then vilified for how could dare you? And it turned out, oh no, those questions were revelatory of a guy who was not interested and didn't know anything about the world. And then that guy led us into the worst foreign policy blunder in American history, worse than Vietnam. And so Trump clearly doesn't have a grasp of these issues. Clearly, and any reading of 10 stories on a daily basis demonstrates a lack of understanding of these critical issues that are so important in the world. And Lauer, at a forum designed just to talk about America's role in the world and the role of our military in the world, didn't ask him about it. Yesterday, Donald Trump lays out his plan. One of his first things he's actually laid out, a plan that involves increasing the Army to 540,000 troops. That involves, I think, buying 90 new planes and 75 new ships. Just increasing the military alone, the Army to 540,000 is a $9 billion annual expense. We're talking $90 billion at a bare minimum. A military, financial military analyst, a budgetary military analyst in the New York Times today, was a reaction to that. How are you going to pay for it? Trump was like, oh, we're going to collect on back taxes. right? He's going to end sequestration. He did all these things that don't make an ounce of sense in the world, that are directly contradicted by exactly what Don Rumsfeld wanted to do with the military, which makes for an interesting question, right? Maybe Rumsfeld was wrong. Rumsfeld was wrong about a lot of stuff. But he didn't have to explain any of that stuff. It's impossible to pay for this, other than because he would also cut taxes, as he's made very clear. He would send us, if these plans were enacted, off a fiscal cliff that would send the country into a deep recession, which is harder to get out of, we've learned, than an actual depression. Yeah. And he didn't have to talk about any of it. He didn't have to talk about any of it.
Look, when you bring up the tax, we haven't talked about his tax plan in a long time, but I mean, the military is a great example of how much spending theoretically he wants to throw into one area. If he got to pass his tax plan, and we've broken it down on the show before, and we know that a Republican Congress would approve it day one, because that's what they want to pass already. An insanely low tax, a massive decrease in the taxes on corporations, especially on the rich. Forget not being able to pay for the military. The budget's done. It's done, and we know how hard it is to raise taxes in this country. You might never get back to a point where any of the social programs that we progressives hold dear can actually be funded. Forget $40 billion away from food stamps. There's no food stamps if you cut it by the amount that he says he wants to.